testicles.
Spending time with a TSA agent couldn't be easier. Simply book a flight departing from any American airport. When selected for a full body scanner, say no. You'll be pulled aside by a TSA agent, and that's when the fun begins. And you never know who your agent will be.
It could be me.
Or me. Or even me.
But it's probably gonna be us.
Take off your damn shoe.
The TSA. It's our business to touch yours.
Welcome to the Bureau of Womanhood Conformity. Independent thoughts are considered subversive because all must agree with our leader.
When it comes to women, preventative care should include coverage of contraceptive services such as birth control.
You see, if you don't believe government should pay for your birth control, you're not a real woman. Womanhood denied. If you refuse to accept that pregnancy is a punishment, you're denied as well.
I don't want them punished with a baby.
If you don't believe that abortions should be allowed for any reason, if you don't believe in aborting a child for being the wrong gender, and if you don't believe that stay-at-home mothers aren't real workers, you are not a real conformed woman.
His wife has actually never worked a day in her life. His wife has actually never worked a day in her life.
Finally, for your safety, if you oppose mandatory government health care, you will die.
They will be voting to say that women can die on the floor.
These standards and regulations were formed after our glorious victory in the war on women. Thank you for your cooperation and your conformity.
Governor Romney's argument is, we're not fixed, so fire him and put me in.
If I was in his shoes, I'd be making the same argument.
It is true, we're not fixed.
We know we're not there yet. We're not where we want to be.
Too many of our friends and family are still out there looking for work.
I don't think anybody would say that we're where we want to be.
The housing market's still weak. Deficits are still too high. Are we satisfied? Of course not. They shouldn't feel satisfied.
There's still a lot of people in trouble.
Are we where we want to be today? No.
Here's the thing. A lot of people are still hurting out there.
But that's not good enough.
That's not good enough.
It's certainly not enough.
We know it's not good enough.
I always believed this was a long-term project. It's going to take more than a year. It's going to take more than 2 years. It's going to take more than one term. Probably takes more than one president. If I don't have this done in 3 years, then there's going to be a one-term proposition.
Welcome back into the Palmetto Conservative Show here on the Conservative Broadcast Media Network. I'm your host, Jim Lee. Glad you're with us tonight. So we continue our little conversation here about what just happened. What just happened here in South Carolina at the state level. Well, we had a number of different things to focus on this time around. I mentioned earlier that at the federal level, I thought that the people demonstrated that they were solidly behind ignorance and apathy on the ballot, and I think that in South Carolina one could make the same argument. There was a constitutional amendment on the ballot here in South Carolina for a provision that, if approved, would, starting in 2018, allow for the governor and the lieutenant governor to run for office on the same ticket. Very similar to what happens at the federal level. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. But never content to leave something simple and straightforward, because the overwhelming majority of people in South Carolina are behind the idea. They like the notion of being able to vote for their governor and lieutenant governor at the same time and on the same ticket, so that they know that in the event that something were to happen to the governor, that the person that would replace them should at least nominally be of the same party and of the same ideological bent. Presumably no governor would put somebody on the ticket as lieutenant governor that didn't, by and large, agree with them on most issues. But not content to keep it simple, stupid, the legislature who drew up the amendment crafted a poison pill. And in addition to allowing the governor and lieutenant governor to be voted on as part of the same contest, they further stripped the role of lieutenant governor of his responsibility to preside over the Senate, and gave that responsibility and power to the Senate. Now, the lieutenant governor, in presiding over the Senate, has the ability to cast a vote in the event of a tie, but other than that, really has no role other than to preside over the Senate, very often directing where legislation goes to committee or gets put up for a floor vote or a debate or something along those lines. Well, by stripping the lieutenant governor of that responsibility and turning it over to the Senate would then appoint from amongst their members their own president who would preside over the Senate. But it was unclear whether or not in doing so that person would either A, lose their vote, because the presiding officer typically does not vote except in the event of a tie. And if they were to lose their vote, then ostensibly the district from which the senator comes would have no representation. Or, on the other hand, if they did retain their vote and there were a tie, would they get a second vote in order to break the tie? And all that minutiae aside, at the end of the day, here in South Carolina, the last thing we need to do is to consolidate even more power in the Senate. Because the Senate here in South Carolina we are a legislatively dominated state. We have the weakest executive branch in the country. And they appoint 1/3 of the executive branch leadership. And in truth, the real power in the state lies in the Senate. But of course, most people did not read the amendment. It never got the attention of the media until the very, very end. And if it weren't for the grassroots waking up, seeing it, and trying to get the word out, it probably would have gone over and been approved by a massive majority. But in fact, it was approved about 55% to 45%. So here in South Carolina, unless there is a change when the legislature goes into session in January, and they craft something to put in front of the voters in 2014 to change that, the Senate in South Carolina just became even stronger. We also had over 150 petition candidates in the state. And sadly, most petition candidates did not fare well. Probably the single most contributing factor to that is the straight party voting, which puts petition candidates and others who are nonpartisan candidates, are independent candidates, at a disadvantage, because the voters in South Carolina tend to vote straight party in large numbers. The one bright light out of the petition candidate races was here in the capital of South Carolina. A very powerful and often embarrassing state senator, Jake Knotts, a Republican in name only, went down to defeat to a petition candidate, Katrina Shealy. And she is the sole female senator in the state Senate. And congratulations goes out to Katrina on a hard-fought and well-deserved victory in that race. But around the state, the vast majority of office holders ran opposed. The few that had opposition won overwhelmingly. Petition candidates did not fare well, and the amendment was approved. So, once again, another banner election for the establishment, not for we the people, but for the establishment. So it sets up some interesting things here in South Carolina for 2014, for those elections, which we'll talk about in depth as time goes on. But that essentially leaves us in South Carolina largely clinging to the status quo. What will be interesting will be the people's response and whether or not they continue to make the noise and to engage in levels to hold accountable those who did get elected. Now in the House, there were actually a few conservative stalwarts who were returned to office and will toward need in the House and in the Senate. But time will tell. A lot of work to be done before the session gets underway in January to make sure that those officials who were elected know, A, that we the people are awake and we're watching, and B, what it is we expect them to be doing. When we come back on the other side of the break, we'll pick up with Hour 2 of the Palmetto Conservative Show. I'm your host, Jim Lee. Stay tuned for News Busted here on the Conservative Broadcast Media Network.
Welcome to News Busted. I'm Jody Miller. Let's get started. President Obama has won re-election, so let 4 more years of blaming President Bush begin. President Obama's re-election is great news for his supporters, so let us here at News Busted be the first to say, welcome back, Carter. Now that Obama has been re-elected, the American people want to know, how will Obama handle the myriad of problems he inherited from himself? After his election victory, President Obama thanked his volunteers, his donors, and all those voting machines that kept changing Romney votes to Obama votes. Mayor Bloomberg ordered people entering New York City to ride at least 3 to a car. And here's a tip for those of you coming in from New Jersey. That dead mobster's body in your trunk does not count as a passenger. A journalist was able to donate to the Obama campaign using the name Osama bin Laden. Well, that makes sense. Democrats have a lot of dead voters. Rolling Stones guitarist Ron Wood is now engaged to his 34-year-old girlfriend. They're registered at Bed Bath and Beyond the Grave. And finally, Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson may just be pretending to be back together in order to promote their next Twilight film. A fake relationship in Hollywood? That's just crazy talk. Thanks for watching News Busted, everyone. I'm Jody Miller. Be sure to subscribe to our videos on YouTube, and we'll catch you next time.